Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to another reading wrap-up. As usual, the minute I actually sit down to film, something starts happening in my neighborhood. My neighbors are having furniture delivered. So if there's banging, that's what that noise is. So I'm going to first start off with some housekeeping notes before I get into talking about books. Number one, I had a video scheduled for this month and it kind of went out the door the minute I didn't read the books that I thought I was going to by the time I needed to film for them. So who knows what my videos are going to be this month. And two, I'm going to be very busy in the second half of May. I have actual things going on with work and vacations and seeing friends pretty much every week or weekend for the remainder of this month, which means my usual filming time is kind of gone. It is just going to be what it is. I'm not going to really fret about this or try to like batch film to make up the time or whatever. So if my videos are a bit erratic and whatever, that would be why. I am mostly just happy that I'm going to be out and about doing some things, of course, safely, because I've been cooped up at home by myself for far too long. Anyway, now let's get into the books. I'm going to start with the cozy mystery series that I've really been enjoying. I'm going to kind of gloss over this one because I'm hoping to do an entire video on the series when I've read maybe half of them, just to save myself some repetition and wrap-ups. But this is the Vampire Knitting Club by Nancy Warren, and the first four that I've listened to as audiobooks are The Vampire Knitting Club, Stitches and Witches, Crochet and Cauldrons, and Stockings and Spells, I think. There are about 13 of these, or there will be by the end of this year, so maybe when I've read like 7 of them, I will do a whole video about the series in a little bit more depth. But basically this follows a 20-something woman when she abruptly inherits her grandmother's yarn store in Oxford, England, and also inherits the vampires that come with it. And most of these mysteries revolve around the yarn store and the vampires who do actually knit, who help the main character out when she's, you know, poking her nose in other people's business and various mysteries and stuff. So it is really, really enjoyable. I've been looking for a cozy mystery series that has the elements I like, as well as decent enough writing to make it palatable, because I've tried some cozy mysteries in the past and I've just cringed over the poor writing or various things. This one hits a real sweet spot for me. And mainly I love it for just having that cozy vibe, as well as the prime knitting content. Like truly, if you are a knitter, if you want to see that sort of thing in your fiction and you just want to listen to something nice and kind of sweet while you're knitting, this is an excellent choice. That's what I'm really enjoying it for. I will talk more about characters, relationships, the world building, the magic, because there are vampires and witches and stuff in a future video. But yeah, suffice it to say, I am planning on powering through all of these. Now on to the manga that I read. I feel like this is gonna be the year of manga, mainly due to the influences of people like Ureya and Maya, who have been talking about it a lot this year, and I just want to pick up everything that they're reading and enjoying. So because of their recommendations, I have finished the Dreams at Dusk series by Yuhki Kamatani. I read volume 3 and volume 4. I kind of wish there was a 5th volume. I think I could have used a little bit more out of the series, but it actually ended on a really wonderful note in volume 4. So Our Dreams at Dusk follows a teenage boy who's realized he's gay. He's kind of sort of outed at high school, and then over a summer he kind of falls in with this group of people who volunteer renovating and refurbishing abandoned homes in the city that they live in, and they kind of all congregate at this drop-in center run by a woman named Someone-san, who's quite mysterious. They don't even know her real name. Many of the people in this group are also LGBTQ, and while the main story is about the teenage boy, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name this morning, and what he's going through and how he makes friends with them and learns about other people's stories, you do also get a glimpse into the backstory of other characters, which I I thought was really, really lovely. So my favorite one in the series, like, this has gotten progressively better for me with every single volume. I think the first one I rated about 3.5 stars, and then I worked up to a 5-star read in volume 4, which I found incredibly touching. That is the one that focuses a lot on the backstory of the older man in their group, whose longtime partner is dying of cancer. And I love that particular character, the older gentleman, and the conclusion to his story and what's happening with his partner and everything. It brought me to tears, but there's also this incredible hopeful note to the entire series that I really enjoyed. The one thing I'm going to pick apart a bit is the thing with Someone-san. Someone-san is asexual and aromantic, and she's also described as a person who seeks out solitude, who doesn't think she's ever going to have like close relationships with other people, and she doesn't want that either. And I really couldn't make sense of this connection with her asexuality. I'm very leery of drawing a connection between relatively cold, shallow relationships that people might have and being asexual. That is actually kind of a nasty stereotype of ace people. But what I wondered about in this case is whether I was missing some cultural context, or maybe the translation didn't quite work for me. I didn't completely understand what was being said about Someone-san and her relationships with other people, and if that truly was because of her asexuality or just a different facet of her personality, perhaps. Whatever. But it kind of made me raise an eyebrow. Whatever. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this series, and I would definitely recommend it if you are seeking out manga that deals with LGBTQ characters, also from an own voices perspective, because the author of the series is non-binary. So very, very glad I read this one. I also read volume 6 of Oku the Inner Chambers by Fumi Yoshinaga. This is an alternate history speculative manga series that follows the Tokugawa shogunate throughout history, in an alternate timeline where a plague, an illness, has killed many of the men in Japan, and women are now things like shoguns. So it's reversing things. There's a female shogun with a male harem, basically. And I thought the series had hit kind of a rut around volumes 4 and 5 when I was just talking about one particular female shogun and all of the drama surrounding like her court. And I thought it was getting a bit repetitive. I was having difficulty remembering who characters are because they're all drawn exactly the same way. And then in volume 6, that storyline is kind of capped off. The characters are old and die, and we move on to new people and new intrigues, and I was like, oh, I'm interested again. So who knows, I might get volume 7. This is definitely getting harder for me to acquire via interlibrary loan. I actually got a message back from a librarian about volume 6 that it had taken them a really long time to find a library in the country that was willing to send this volume out for ILL. So I don't know. I have a feeling I will actually end up stopping this series, mainly because I don't want to buy it, but I can't get it from the library anymore. So we'll see. Next up, I read an absolutely beautiful graphic novel. This is The Magic Fish by Trung Nguyen, and I came across this because of the artist's artwork. I just found him on Twitter and was like, this artwork is so beautiful, what else has he done? And then I found out he had his first book out. I think he goes by Trungles online. Anyway, this graphic novel follows a 14-year-old boy in 1990s America. His family are immigrants from Vietnam, and he's gay, and he's struggling with if or when he should come out to his parents at the same time that his mother has to abruptly return to Vietnam because his grandmother passes away. And at first I approached this a bit as like an immigrant experience pseudo memoir, I guess. It is fiction, but I found it very interesting to read the author's commentary at the end of the graphic novel, where he explains that while yes, this does include some of like the immigrant experience, he was actually trying to de-center that and show that there's more to people's lives than just the fact that they immigrated. Like, things happen after the conclusion of the immigrant story, you know, and I actually really appreciated that. So while the main character's parents immigrated, and there is that in the background, it's not the sole focus of his life or his story. And this just magically weaves in fairy tales. I'm not that hugely fond of fairy tales. Fairy tale retellings isn't a big buzzword for me, but I thought that the way the artist wove these into the story, especially the way that he used like color coding to visually show what panels were like the modern day, what were flashbacks, and what were the stories being read aloud, it made everything flow so well, and I was never confused. It was amazing. So basically, the boy and his mother kind of communicate by sharing fairy tales with each other. They're reading to each other aloud from a book, but also his mother, when she goes back to Vietnam, she hears another like version of Cinderella from one of her family members as well. It gives them this language to communicate about something that they struggle to do in English or in Vietnamese, and I loved this idea. So yeah, this was a really wonderful graphic novel. I would recommend this for so many reasons. I mean, it's beautiful artwork, a beautiful story, just I think great visual storytelling, and it made me enjoy some elements like the fairy tales that otherwise wouldn't really be my jam. So this was great. Now for some novellas. I finally read something by Aliya Whiteley. I got my hands on The Arrival of Missives, which I'd heard about some years ago, I think because it was an Otherwise Award nominee, it was a BSFA nominee, and all I'd heard about this is that there's this major twist in the story, like it goes in this kind of bizarre direction. I've always been curious, so I was reading it to find out what the twist was. I didn't actually think it was that surprising, but there was another element of it that I did really enjoy. So this is set right after World War I, I believe, in England, and it follows a 17-year-old girl who is basically in love with her teacher. This young man who was a soldier in the war, he's come home very badly injured, and she accepts him, she wants him, she's built up this scenario in her mind where she's going to be his companion, she's going to also be a teacher, and she's going to assist him. And when she goes to basically tell him how she feels, she discovers his secret. He writes her a letter that explains what happened to him, and because she knows about him, he's going to ask her for her help in something that he's trying to do. And the contents of the letter, that is where the bizarre twist I think is supposed to begin. I actually kind of saw it coming, like not like that specific thing, but roughly where things were going. What I really liked about this is that the journey you go on inside of Shelley's head, because she's telling the story and it starts out in this like really awkward place where you're watching this teenage girl in love with a slightly older man, and it's this fantasy she's built up in her head, and I'm just like, oh honey, no, no. And then how she proceeds to change her mind and kind of grows up, it's really interesting. And one of the more fascinating elements for me was the moment when you see that her reaction to this thing in the story is so utterly different from the man's reaction. The way that they make completely different decisions based on the same information, it really got to me for some reason, like, yeah. So I probably haven't described this one very well. I don't know if I've conveyed like what it feels like or what it's really about or not, but it was really interesting. I found it very compelling. I really liked the writing and the style of it. I do think it's a bit of an odd duck. I'm not sure how to classify this one, but I am really glad that I read it, and I will read more things by Aliya Whiteley in the future. Another novella that isn't my usual fare but that I found very interesting is Passing by Nella Larsen. I heard many people mentioning this story in relation to a newer book by Britt Bennett, because it bears a lot of resemblance. I think Bennett's book is about two black sisters, one of whom passes as white, the other one chooses not to, and then they meet later on. And Passing, which was published in 1929, is about two childhood friends from the same like black neighborhood in Chicago. One of them, Claire, leaves their community. She leaves her past behind. She passes as white and marries a white man who has no idea who she is or where she came from. And he is also incredibly racist. And the other, Irene, she still presents herself as black, even though she could pass, and she kind of uses that a little bit to her advantage in some situations. She marries a black man and has children who are darker skinned than she is, and she moves to New York City. Years later, they happen to meet again, and Claire kind of invites herself back into Irene's social life, I guess. It's as if Claire realizes how much she was missing by being around people like her. She misses being around black people. And so she comes back, she starts integrating herself a bit more into Irene's life, into their community of black and mixed people, all the while knowing that if her husband, who hates black people, finds out, she's in danger. And Irene, who's telling the story, is struggling with her feelings about Claire, about how Claire is passing and the benefit of that, but also the dangers of it. And also, I think, just jealous of Claire, who is very beautiful and successful, and everybody kind of wants to help her. And Irene knows she shouldn't for her own safety, and yet gets kind of manipulated into doing it anyway. It was a really interesting story. I really enjoyed it. I also really liked the way that it was written. I do think it kind of has that early 20th century style to it, just the way that people write letters to each other and speak and all of that. But what I was most impressed by is the emotions. I felt like Nella Larsen was really able to convey how Irene was feeling, especially with these very contradictory and sudden emotional reactions that Irene herself couldn't really figure out. But I could feel that in the story. It doesn't have a super happy ending. You can feel this build up to something tragic happening. I was a little bit surprised at actually how it ended, though, interestingly. So I'm very glad that I read this one too. Nella Larsen didn't write that much. She had a previous short novel that came before Passing called Quicksand, which I believe was much more autobiographical. And now that I've read a bit more about her and her history, I'm kind of curious to read Quicksand. I think I might also enjoy it, so maybe I will get my hands on that as well. You knew this one was coming. I read Fugitive Telemetry by Martha Wells. This is the 5th Murderbot novella. It takes place in between the 4th novella, Exit Strategy, and the novel Network Effect. So if you're planning on reading this series, you need to read the first 4 before you get to Fugitive Telemetry. Otherwise, where Murderbot is at this point isn't gonna make a lot of sense. I loved this, just completely honestly, I adored it. I've loved everything with Murderbot so much. And in this one, it is on Preservation Station, and it's kind of its first attempt at having like a job contract with the local security office, which is something that Dr. Mensa, its friend and guardian on Preservation, wants it to do. And it ends up having to assist the local security office with a murder investigation. somebody ends up dead on the station, which is incredibly rare, and it helps them. And even though it doesn't really want to interact with humans, it does. I loved it. I think Murderbot probably works best as novellas. I did enjoy the novel Network Effect, but there's something so good about the short, snappy stuff that happens in the novellas. I love it. I love it so much. I know Murderbot isn't for everybody, but I am one of those people who just connects with it so strongly because of how it deals with anxiety and it just relating to other people and stuff. I love the internal journey that Murderbot is going on, and I find I relate to a lot of its inner monologue sometimes. Plus, things like this story, which is a pretty straightforward murder investigation with some sci-fi twists thrown in, that is absolutely what I love reading. Unfortunately, I'm going to end this wrap-up with 2 duds, which I don't like saying this, but sometimes books just don't work for you. The one that I don't have very much to talk about is Dead Astronauts by Jeff VanderMeer. I'm reading this with a group of friends and we haven't had our book talk about it yet, so maybe I would have had more thoughts if I talked to them first, but this is not a sequel to Born, but it takes place in the same world as Born, with this like devastated apocalyptic city with strange things happening, like a gigantic bear that flies around. There's this company that is supposedly the cause of a lot of the environmental destruction, some of the timeline weirdness, and some of the creatures that it made. And the dead astronauts appeared in Born, I think, just as these like half-buried astronaut suits with skeletons inside. This book, it makes absolutely no sense. I don't even know how to summarize it because I don't think that there's a plot. The 3 astronauts, only one of them is actually an astronaut, are Grayson, Chen, and Moss. And they're like friends that are also, I don't know, I feel like their entire existence might be some sort of strange metaphor for like collapsing wave functions and particle theory or something. Like, that's the first thing that came to mind to try to explain the weirdness in this book. But basically, things keep repeating, and I think that the company has somehow started to invade other timelines, other realities, and this has messed everything up, and the 3 astronauts keep coming back to the city to confront the company in some way, and sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't, but they keep doing it over and over again in different timelines. If there's anything more to the story than that, I have no clue. I don't know why they're doing this or what will happen if they succeed or if they don't succeed. At a certain point, it just kind of stops talking about them and moves on to some strange stuff with other creatures and repeating the same sentence 100 times across 3 pages. This is basically a bunch of extremely experimental writing and storytelling. Either I'm not smart enough to understand it, or it's so far outside of my own comfort zone and what I actually enjoy reading that I would never have tried to actually digest it and understand it in the first place. So that's that. Dead Astronauts. I did not like it, I did not understand it, and I didn't think it was a particularly good book because it was so impenetrable. Born was still pretty good though. If you enjoyed Born, Dead Astronauts is completely different. And lastly, Brown Girl in the Ring by Nalo Hopkinson. I think I described this as a dud. It's more like it was just okay. It didn't wow me. It was all right. This one has to do with a future kind of dystopian version of Toronto. Something has happened in the city that caused a lot of its infrastructure to collapse. The government is gone, even though the rest of Canada still seems to be functioning. So it's this very harsh place to live in, and it follows a young woman, Tijan, who has recently given birth to her son, her pseudo-ex-boyfriend Tony, who is a POS and a drug dealer and addicted to the drugs that he deals, and her grandmother, Rojan, I think, who is my favorite character, and the book needed way more of her common sense. I found the story in this to be very predictable, and that's probably why it didn't work very well for me. I just got very hung up on the relationship between Tijan and Tony. Tony is not a good person, and Tijan seems to lose any of her brain cells whenever she's around him because the sex is really good, and I just don't understand this. So many things that go wrong in the story go wrong because people are thinking with other portions of their anatomy rather than their brains. It was predictable. I could tell what was going to happen most of the time. I mostly wanted more of the grandmother and sort of her backstory and her family stuff, and I was very irritated whenever the story was focused on Tijan or on Tony and their main characters, so a lot of it is literally about them. I got done with it and was like, I don't think that one was for me. I am continuing with other books by Hopkinson though. Unfortunately, while I'm in the middle of Sister Mine, I think this is another one that's not going to be for me because it's just got like way too many out there elements. So if you have any recommendations for Hopkinson's novels that you think would actually be my cup of tea, please let me know. Because I want to read something by Nalo Hopkinson and really enjoy it, and apparently my own choices have not been great to start with. So anyway, that is it for me this week. Apologies if some of this veered off into strange territory. I've got a bit of brain fog right now, and my attention is just going off in some other direction and I can't seem to find it. So if you have read any of these books, do let me know your thoughts of them down below. Leave me some comments. I'll be back when I can. And until then, bye.